arguably the biggest news of the last few days within the rock world is that Ozzy Osbourne, along with plenty of others, were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, the class of 2024. Of course, Ozzy was inducted as a solo artist, and he is the 27th person to be inducted more than once, along with Stevie Nicks, John Lennon, Neil Young, a bunch of others, because, of course, he was first inducted back in 2006 with Black Sabbath. And on Saturday, during the induction, he was inducted by Jack Black. And, I got to say, I'm not really the world's biggest Jack Black fan. I think he's all right. But, I mean, my God, you do got to give the guy props for what he has done to bring metal into the mainstream, at least in some capacity, in some way over the years. When you look at School of Rock, which was still such a great movie. I loved it when I was a kid. I love it now. You look at the Brutal Legend video game that's probably almost 20 years old now, that had Ozzy himself, Lemmy, Rob Halford, I think, was in it. Every song in the game had this crazy soundtrack of just fucking banger after banger. Everything from Motley Crue to Def Leppard to Saxon to just, I mean, you name it, it was in there, all kinds of metal. Even the Tenacious D movie with the cameo from Dio and stuff like that. There's no doubt that Jack Black is a major, major metal fan, and he's always going out of his way to promote it. So good on him for that. And, as far as Ozzy goes, I mean, we knew that most likely Ozzy was not going to perform. All signs were pointing to that. I was still very hopeful. I think plenty of people were very hopeful, but obviously, if you watched it, that is not what happened. But at the very least, I'm glad he was there, but I got to say, it was very rough to see him in the shape that he's in. I mean, it was very, very sad. I mean, I've seen recent photos of him, and I've seen him in the podcast. I mean, he's doing a lot of podcasts with the Osbournes podcast. He does a bunch of stuff with Billy Morrison, who plays guitar with Billy Idol, which we'll get into that in a minute. But, he's always online, but I don't know what it was. There was something over the weekend, because that was the only, Ozzy's induction was the only full one that I watched. There was just something, Ozzy just looked, I don't know. He just looked like he was in pain. I don't know. There's really no other way to put it. He looked a lot older, exhausted. I don't know. I felt really, really bad. It was very sad to see. Obviously, he's made plenty of attempts over the last few years to try to go out and play. With the Power Trip Festival last year, where they do Coachella. It was originally Black Sabbath supposed to play before it was announced, and then they didn't think Ozzy was going to be able to do it, so they backed out. Then when the festival was actually announced, it was announced with Ozzy, and then, of course, that didn't happen, so Ozzy got replaced by Judas Priest. And I think there were a few other scenarios similar. I know he's tried to perform a few times over the last few years, but his ailments have prevented that from happening, which is such a bummer. And I think, maybe, even with the Power Trip and all that stuff, I think, there was still maybe some hope that he would be able to, because I know he talked about wanting to do like some final shows in the UK or something. And, I think there was maybe some hope that he could get into the shape to be able to perform one last time. But, I don't think anybody expected him to go out and do a full-blown tour or something like that. But, I think maybe there was a little hope left that possibly he could get into the shape to do, one show or, a couple final shows. But, after seeing the shape that he was in over the weekend, I would be so shocked if Ozzy ever did a public performance ever again. And it's really, really sad to say that, but I don't know. I would be shocked. He came off pretty emotional, I thought, during the speech that he gave, which is very, very brief. He, of course, gave props to Randy Rhoads, and rightfully so, but I do still wish, and I know there's plenty of people out there that agree, I wish there was some mention of Jake E. Lee, Bob Daisley, Lee Kerslake, Tommy Aldridge, Rudy Sarzo. So many people. I don't think anybody would have, expected him to do that. He never really has. He's talked about Randy Rhoads plenty of times in the past, and same with Zakk Wylde, but pretty much everybody else, I mean, it's almost as if, kind of like if you're a Howard Stern fan, it's like once one of the staffers leaves the show, that's the end of it. Howard never even talks about him again. And that's kind of what it's like with Ozzy. When somebody's out of the band, I mean, very rarely does he really say much at all about any of the former band members. And, a lot of those guys have played a really integral part in his career, writing all those songs and all that. So, again, not expected, but would have been very, very welcome. And while he did not perform, which, again, I don't think came to the surprise of anybody, it was cool to hear him do All Aboard, from Crazy Train. And honestly, when he did that, I'm like, well, maybe he will, because he was sitting in this badass throne, which was just so fucking cool that I'm assuming they made that specifically for the induction, and it was just so badass. But when he did the All Aboard, I'm like, oh, fuck, maybe he's going to at least, sing Crazy Train or part of Crazy Train or whatever. Obviously, that's not what happened, but to hear him do the All Aboard one last time was definitely awesome. Put a big smile on my face. If you missed it, here's a quick clip of it right now. As far as the performances, to celebrate the music of Ozzy Osbourne, there were so many people up on stage, but, the different singers they had, they first started with Maynard James Keenan from Tool, doing Crazy Train, which I thought was all right. I mean, it was good. Maynard's a great singer, but, it was what it was to me. I did think Jelly Roll doing Mama, I'm Coming Home was really, really good. Not somebody, I forget, I knew it was announced that Jelly Roll was going to be performing. I did not realize it was going to be an Ozzy song. I'm not sure if that was out there or not, but I thought Jelly Roll did a great rendition of Mama, I'm Coming Home. Zakk Wylde, of course, absolutely crushing, like he always does. Very, very solid. Then when Billy Idol came out and did No More Tears, I don't know what it was. I mean, it just didn't quite stick the landing for me. Billy Idol's great, don't get me wrong. I just, I don't know. I guess I just feel like he didn't nail it. It was cool to see Steve Stevens up there, though, that's for sure. It was cool to see Billy Idol, too, don't get me wrong. But I don't know. I guess I just I was expecting something different than what was delivered, I guess. But, and as far as the Billy Idol thing goes, like I mentioned earlier, Ozzy's doing all these, he does the podcast, the Osbournes podcast, but then he does something with Billy Morrison. I can't remember the name of that podcast, but then Billy Morrison also hosts the radio show Ozzy Speaks on Ozzy's Boneyard on Sirius XM. They are very, very close. They also just had the number one rock song for a while. It's a Billy Morrison song featuring Ozzy called Crack Cocaine. That was number one, I think, for at least a few weeks. So they're very, very close. Billy Morrison is Billy Idol's other guitar player alongside Steve Stevens. So I would imagine, I'm sure Billy Idol and Ozzy have known each other for a long time. But I feel like that's the connection with Billy Morrison and Billy Idol and Ozzy, the little triangle there. I feel like that's probably how the Billy Idol performing at the Rock Hall came about. I don't know. I'm just speculating, but that's how I would imagine that played out. I will say, though, one of the highlights for me was to see Wolfgang Van Halen out there playing guitar. I mean, fuck, man. God, that guy just rips. I'm such a big fan of Mammoth WVH. I think both of the records he's put out are just absolutely phenomenal. Probably one of my favorite new rock bands, probably top three newer rock bands for me, at least. So that was really, really cool to see. All in all, I mean, look, I think, the only thing that could have made Ozzy's induction better would be Ozzy performing. But other than that, Ozzy's induction, I thought, was excellent.